Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's show, I have former All-American pitcher from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater coming on the Sports Mastery podcast. Later, he received his master's degree from Baylor University. This gentleman is now an author and a speaker. He is also the founder of a mentorship program called Coachability, where he's had the great fortune of coaching and mentoring athletes at every level. His book, Pitching Against Myself, is about his baseball career and all of the life lessons that he learned throughout it and how they apply to life after sports. His book also shares an important message that he wished he would have been able to hear back when he was playing before he experienced an identity crisis, depression, and even attempts at suicide. It's a message that says you are more than an athlete. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome Riley Tincher to the Sports Mastery podcast. Today, Riley is going to share his personal story and life lessons. He's going to discuss the meaning behind the message, you are more than an athlete. By the end of this episode, he's going to share some of his athlete client stories.
Hey, Deshaun, that was an amazing intro. That was so great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for this opportunity. And I'm just really happy to be here, man. Like you said, as of today, I'm, an author, a speaker, and running this mentorship program, in which I have the great fortune of working with, not just elite level athletes, but also youth and high school and even some Olympic athlete. But it's amazing. It's amazing where life can take you if you just kind of surrender to it.
Yes, I want to say thank you again, because I really appreciate you reaching out to me, man, and us able to get this show on the books as soon as possible. So again, I appreciate you clearing out your schedule and making this thing happen. I love working with young people. It's something that I didn't have growing up, as far as being able to work with somebody that had been to college, maybe played at the next level, that could show you the pitfalls or the landmines that might be on the other side of the field that you have to walk through to get there, that could help you with mistakes, that could share their social intelligence, that could share their emotional intelligence. And, what I see with your story is awesome, because I know that you've been through some things, and I appreciate you coming forward and sharing your story. And I know, now is the time for the athlete, to learn how to express himself in terms of the things that they want, or if they're struggling with certain issues. And I know you have some life lessons. Tell us about some of your life lessons or things you wish you had growing up or when you were playing the sport.
That's such a great question. And I do got to say, thank you for allowing me to share my story on your platform. A lot of the lessons that we learn is in retrospect, when we look back at our life. And really, that's what I do now is I kind of go back through my life, go through each chapter, each season in my life, and figure out what it is that I was supposed to learn in that situation. So to take it back, all the way back to when I started playing baseball in 8th grade, I was 14 years old. It was the summer after my 8th grade year. And I decided that I was going to play competitive baseball for the first time. And, prior to that, I would just play kind of wiffle ball in the neighborhood with my neighborhood friends. On occasion, we would go down to the Little League fields right outside of our neighborhood, and we would do a home run derby. And out of all the friends, I was the only one that could hit the ball out of the park. And I got the encouragement from them to, hey, you should probably try to do this competitively. And I jumped ship and I took a leap of faith and I tried out. I was nervous as all get out. And to say that, my first impression of baseball was awful would be an understatement, mainly because I was terrible. Because of the fear that I had while I was playing, and because I've never played it before. I actually had a hard time deciphering where was left field, where was right field, things like that. I just didn't know the game. And it took a long time for me to understand it, but it didn't take away my passion for it. And, I went 0 for the entire season. I didn't even get a hit. I I didn't even make contact with the ball, not even a foul tip. I struck out every single at bat. And the first opportunity I got fielding my position was the first game, literally third inning of the first game. I was in left field and I get a ground ball hit to me and it goes right between my legs and rolls all the way to the fence, and I run after it. I pick it up and I throw it to the wrong person. And what should have been a single turned out being a home run. Again, I was terrible. And the problem was I wasn't the only one that knew I was terrible. My parents knew I was terrible, and my coach knew I was terrible. I was so bad that he felt the need to lie to me and my parents about practice and game times just so I wouldn't show up.
Wow.
And at the end of the season, he took me aside after our final huddle together, and he put his arm around me like a loving, caring coach usually does. And he told me 3 words that stuck with me for the rest of my career. And those 3 words were, "You should quit." And then he followed that up with, "I don't believe you have a future in baseball." Now, at 14 years old, those are devastating words to hear, especially coming from someone who I desperately sought the approval of. And I desperately wanted to impress. So at that moment in my life, at 14 years old, I had to make a decision. Do I listen to this coach, who, again, I desperately wanted to impress? Or do I follow my own passion for baseball, and do I continue? And obviously, I continued, luckily. And the lesson I learned in that is actually the first chapter of my book. And the first chapter of my book is "You Should Quit." And the moral of the chapter is there are going to be people in your life who tell you that you can't do something. There are going to be people in your life that don't believe in your dream. And some of those people are going to be the ones who have the most influence on you and are the ones that are closest to you. But it's not even about them and what they say. They are just reflecting their unbelief on you. So now I get the chance to go to coaching conferences and speak, and I share a message about the power and impact coaches have on their athletes' lives, not just their sports careers, on their lives. And I finish each speech with, "Coaches, your athletes are going to remember you for the rest of your life, or rest of their life. How do you want to be remembered?" You know, us as coaches, we like to throw this word around a lot, and the word is potential. And the truth is, we can't define it. We can't. If you were to tell me at that point in my life, at 14 years old, after making an error my first attempt, not getting a single hit the whole season, getting lied to because I was so bad, that he would eventually become an All-American and an All-Star in the Northwoods League, one of the most prestigious summer leagues in the country, I would tell that person he was lying. And the next year, I met this coach who told me all of these things, who I consider one of the greatest coaches in all of baseball. That's Coach Darren Everson. He's the minor league hitting coordinator for the Rockies now. Okay. And he'll be in the majors probably next year, if not this year. And the reason why I consider him the greatest coach is because he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And he demanded more from me than I demanded from myself. And he pulled out of me who I was meant to become. And he took this unathletic, uncoordinated, chubby little 14-year-old kid who wanted to be a left-handed catcher. And if you know anything about baseball, there is no such thing as left-handed catchers.
Correct.
And he lovingly and caringly told me, "Hey, let's not be a catcher. Let's turn you into a pitcher." And even though on my first start as a pitcher, I didn't get a single out, I walked every single hitter I faced, he didn't let me quit, even though I desperately wanted to. Instead, he continued to give me chance after chance after chance until I finally made the varsity roster my junior year of high school. And you would think after giving all of these chances to succeed that I would take advantage of them, but I didn't. Instead, my first varsity start was much like my first ever start. I didn't get a single out. I walked every hitter I faced. And as I was getting pulled from the game, I look in the crowd, and guess who is there? My 8th grade coach.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, man. I got back to the dugout. I put a towel over my head and I cried. And I couldn't help but think, my 8th grade coach was right. I should have quit. And then this just kind of snowballed into, this is it. This is the end of my baseball career. I have nothing to show for it. And on the bus ride home, these thoughts got worse. We got back to the high school, and Coach Everson pulled me aside and had me go into our field house in the high school. And I thought, oh, great. Now he's going to physically punish me for performing so terribly. But he didn't. He had me throw a bullpen in the field house because I only threw about 30, 40 pitches that day. And before the bullpen, he pulled me aside and he said, Riley, watching you pitch today was like watching paint dry. And he said, you took so much time in between pitches. I actually timed you one time. It almost took you 2 full minutes from one pitch to throw the next. And the more time you took, the worse you got because you gave yourself time to overthink. So in this bullpen, we're going to speed things up. We're going to pick up the pace, and I'm going to stop you from overthinking. So after every single pitch I threw in that bullpen, he was behind me yelling, again, 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 until the bullpen was over. And as we were walking out, he put his arm around me, just like my 8th grade coach did. And he said, Riley, I'm going to give you another chance this weekend, and I want you to pitch just how you pitched in this bullpen, the same way your teammates and I believe you can pitch. And those are powerful words to hear at 16 years old, at any age. And the lesson in this is it's amazing what can happen when you have a leader or a coach who believes in you. It's amazing what can happen. And the following weekend, I pitched the second game of the doubleheader. And as I got onto the mound to throw the first pitch, I threw strike one. And out of the dugout came this booming, echoing voice. Coach Everson yelled out, "Get back up there." And it's a booming, echoing voice because he's a monster of a man. He's a Goliath. He's 6'4", 300 pounds, bare paws for hands. He's just a monster. And this voice echoed throughout the field. You could probably hear it back in my hometown. So I got back up on the mound. I threw strike 2, and out of the dugout came that voice again. "Get back up there." So I scrambled up to the mound, and I got back up on the mound, threw strike 3, struck him out. And after they got done throwing it around the infield, as soon as I got the ball back, he yelled it again, "Get back up there." And he continued to do that after every single pitch I threw that day, which was well over 100. And the funny thing was, I wasn't the only one that was scrambling to get to the next pitch. At the end of the game, the opposing hitters were actually running up to home plate just so he wouldn't yell at them.
Right.
And what happened was I go from literally a few days earlier, not getting a single out, walking every single hitter I faced, to a few days later, breaking the school record in strikeouts in a single game. And again, the lesson is it's amazing what can happen to an athlete or to anyone when they have a leader or a coach or a mentor who believes in them and cares about them as a person, not what they perform on the field, not what they do for them and the team, but as the person is who they are. And that's why, again, I consider Coach Everson one of the greatest coaches of all time, if not the greatest coach in all of baseball.
You know, I really appreciate your story, man, and listening to you. And did you say Everson?
Everson.
Everson.
Everson. Yep.
Yes, I can really appreciate Coach Everson because, you know, it takes having some experience. It takes having emotional intelligence. It takes having social intelligence. And he definitely epitomizes that because he understood how you felt at the time, but he also could see that you had some talent. And sometimes seeing talent is just seeing the kid that shows up day in and day out. I don't care how bad you are, but if you keep coming, you know, eventually you're going to get it. We're going to have some breakthroughs. And when I think about that first, Coach, you know, there's a whole list of words that I can think of to express. I'm not going to do that nevertheless. But sometimes it's just like you said, it's simple of like, maybe we have to find the right position for you. We need to explore some other positions. I believe you can play this game, but the position that you started with, maybe it's a different position, you know? I mean, I've been there, but I've never I've heard things, but not to that extent, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know,
and the real problem is my story is not unique. This is happening to millions of athletes across the country.
yes,
I'm talking about terrible coaching.
terrible coaching.
Yeah. Coaches that win by any means, even if that means is tearing apart your athletes.
It's tough because we've talked about this before, and it's just like you're talking about. I remember things that other coaches have said to me 20, 25 years later, 30 years later, you know? So I think sometimes us collectively as coaches, and this is all of us, we don't understand the impact that we have on the youth. You know, the good experiences, you know, that's great. But when you say something that could be negative and you're not aware of that, it goes with the kids for a long time. Or maybe you're just not being sensitive, or you don't have the intelligence socially. So it goes beyond coaching and X's and O's and really, you know, building a relationship with young people.
Yep.
Because
and the thing,
go ahead.
The thing is, sorry to cut you off, Deshaun.
No worries.
The thing is, we can't even begin to comprehend our impact, let alone the words that we say. We can't even begin to comprehend it, but we've felt it. And just like you said, you know the things that your coaches said to you 25 years ago, and you know how that feels. And this is the thing that I do in the speech that I give with the coaches conferences, is that same thing. That same line. You know how this feels. If I could ask you, what is the worst thing a coach has ever said to you? You could think of it like that.
Definitely. I played baseball too. I started a little younger than you. I started in 6th grade. My first position was catcher. I hated it. The next year, I switched to third base. My cousin was a pitcher, and it seemed like he was throwing 100 miles an hour back then. I'd be back there crying, tissue in the mitt to soften it up. Later, I ended up playing third base, later shortstop. I'm like, I'm trying them all, you know, because my uncle wasn't my coach. My uncle was my coach my first year. And as I got older, I thanked him for it, because that was the toughest position. It got me out of being scared of the ball that first year. You know, I was different. I did get a few hits, but I tried pitching. I did that, man. At 14, 15, start hitting my testosterone. I didn't have any control. And later I became an outfielder and batted leadoff. But I remember going to a camp at the University of Portland, and the head coach, he said, "Son, you can't play shortstop. Your release is too long. You know, pitching, you have a strong arm, but what I see is you sticking to the outfield." And he said, if you stick to playing outfield and leave pitching alone and concentrate on hitting, you'll bat 500 your senior year.
Wow.
I had one pitching outing where I walked every batter. You know what that's like, just the anxiety.
I do.
It feels like you're going to be on the mound forever. You know, I said, "Coach, I'm done. I just want to play outfield. Let somebody else do it." I focused on outfield, batted leadoff, and ended up hitting 420 my senior year. Now, the caveat to all of that was I was just a little bit better in football, so I pursued football. You know, but baseball was fun. I had a lot of life experiences, a lot of fun. You know what I mean? I can say that is where I got my appreciation for country music, because our coach listened to country, you know, going to baseball tournaments. I remember playing sometimes 4 or 6 games over a weekend. You know what that's like, you know, being in different tournaments. I wanted to switch lanes, Riley, and tell us about the meaning behind the message, "You are more than an athlete." Talk to my sports parents out there, talk to my student athletes and the youth coaches that listen to this show. What does that mean to you?
So again, this kind of ties in with my story. To fast forward, you know, to even jump back, you know, because of Coach Everson's relentless belief in me, I ended up the next year, after I broke the school record in strikeouts in a game, getting my first scholarship to play in college, despite being told 4 years prior to that I should quit. And this led me to go to a junior college. I had a terrible experience there. Transferred to another junior college, North Iowa Area Community College, with Coach Todd Rima and Coach Travis Herger, which, again, it's amazing what can happen when you have leaders who believe in you and demand more from you than you demand from yourself. And then from that point, I transferred to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, where I met another coach who, again, believed in me more than I believed in myself and pulled out of me who I was meant to become. I went from my first year at Whitewater pitching 13 innings because I got injured prior to the season to winning 13 games the next year and becoming an All-American, leading the entire NCAA in victories.
Wow, that's incredible.
And becoming the pitcher of the year, all this stuff. And that following summer, going to the Northwoods League and becoming an all-star and striking out guys who are now hitting in the major leagues. And when I got back to Whitewater my senior year, I was in the hallway walking to my class, and I bumped into one of the most illustrious coaches in the history of college baseball, and that's Coach Jim Miller. He was one of the first coaches at Whitewater, and he kind of remained on as a consultant, kind of just a super fan, always there, always loyal. He pulled me aside and he started talking to me about my senior year. He's like, what do you want? What do you want to accomplish? What are the things moving forward? And he stopped me in the middle of me telling him all of this. And he said, being an All-American, being pitcher of the year, winning All-Star or earning the All-Star award in the Northwoods League is great, but it's what you do after that matters the most. He said, the thing is, every team you face this year, they are going to play against you like they're playing their World Series. You have a huge target on your back. And do you know how you beat them? Through your work ethic. And this stayed with me for the rest of my senior year. And this was great because it kept me focused on doing the things that I can control, my work ethic, my preparation, all of the things that went into visualization, routines, those things. But it was also a double-edged sword because this was the point where a lot of pressure was put on me, a lot of pressure I put on myself. And from that point on, I wanted to be the captain that I always wish I had. I wanted to repeat my All-American performance. I wanted to be perfect, be this perfect player. And this pressure surmounted, and it became almost impossible to handle, and it almost crushed me. And this pressure turned into depression for the first time in my life. And I remember my first day of winter break, driving back to the house I grew up in, and it was late at night, and I started having suicidal thoughts. And I thought, if I just swerve my car into a tree, or if I just pull out in front of a semi-truck, all of this could end. All this pressure, all this pain I'm feeling could just go away. So I decided to follow through with it. I got to an intersection of two highways, Highway 26 and County Road N, just outside of Whitewater. And I sat there at the stop sign waiting for a semi-truck for what felt like an eternity. And when one finally came, as it got closer, I closed my eyes. I gripped onto the steering wheel. I slowly left my foot off the brake, and I rolled out onto the highway, and I braced for impact. And after a few very, very long seconds, I realized I didn't get hit, and I opened my eyes and I looked to my left, and the semi-truck was literally 20 yards away from me, honking his horn at a dead stop. And I was so embarrassed. And I peeled off that highway, and I never told anyone about this because in my head, I'm the All-American. I'm the pitcher of the year. I'm the captain of the team. I'm the one everyone looks up to. They can't know that I'm struggling. They can't know that I'm weak. And by suppressing this for the rest of my senior year, even though on the inside I was desperately crying for help, I didn't tell anyone. And by suppressing this, it didn't get better, it got worse. especially when my escape, my identity, baseball player, was taken away from me. I went from one of the best weeks of my life, leading my team to the College World Series, winning several awards again, to the worst week of my life, losing to a team I should have beat, and my career ending. And all of those professional teams that were reaching out to me, wanting to sign me after my senior year, I'd never heard from them again. And I wondered why. And the worst part was the guys that I played with in the Northwoods League were getting opportunities that I wasn't getting. And these were guys that I thought I was better than. So this just ate me alive. And it got worse and worse and worse. And this thought of I should be playing baseball right now just continued to snowball until about 6 months later, about 2 weeks before winter break at grad school at Baylor University, I had suicidal thoughts again. And this time I was literally seconds away from pulling the trigger. And I thought I turned my phone off, and it rang. And it was a former teammate of mine. And I answered, and I couldn't say a word because I was so distraught. And this teammate of mine, he flew into Dallas-Fort Worth, which is about an hour north of Waco. And his flight was canceled. And he called me thinking this would be a great chance to come down and spend some time with me before his next flight the next morning. And he stayed on the phone with me that whole ride to Waco. And then he stayed with me for a few days just to make sure that I was okay. But again, this was just treating symptoms. This was just a short-term relief. I never really got the help that I needed. And again, I carried this burden around with me, not telling anyone about it. He was really the only one that knew. And I started, they say, what can't destroy you will distract you. And I got real good at strength and conditioning. I was a strength coach at Baylor, and I got real good at it. I started getting offers, started working more and more, but still in the back of my mind, it's like I should still be playing baseball. I don't understand this. And the worst part is I would tell people that I was a left-handed pitcher, and always the response was, oh man, the MLB needs more left-handed pitchers. And I'm like, really? Then why am I not pitching? So I carried this with me, and about 2 years later, I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I am now, and I get into, a financial burden, and I can't pay my bills, and it just, all of these things just weighed on me, and the suicidal thoughts happened again. And I thought, this time I'm going to be serious. I'm going to take it seriously. I'm going to plan this out. I'm going to plan the day that I'm going to do it. I'm going to plan how I'm going to do it. I'm going to say all my goodbyes, and I'm going to write a suicide note. And on the day I planned on committing suicide, I get a phone call from one of my mentors who I hadn't heard from in a long time. And I answered thinking that this would be the last time I would ever talk to him. And thank God I did, because he saved my life. And when he asked me how I was doing, he refused to accept my answer of, I'm fine. I'm fine. He kept on going, no, really, how you doing? No, really, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? He said this about 10, 15 times till I finally told him. And just like my teammate, he stayed on the phone with me until I promised that I wouldn't follow through with this. And then he continued to call me every hour on the hour for the next, I believe, 5 days, just to make sure I was okay. And in each conversation, he poured truth into me. He encouraged me. He counseled me. And he told me things that would eventually change the rest of my life. One of them being, there is purpose in your pain. Now, at the time, I didn't know what that meant, because I was in one of the darkest periods of my life where I literally felt like I was drowning every single day. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to see anyone. And another thing kind of came out of these conversations. He told me to write in a journal about my entire baseball career, because up until that point, I put baseball away because I became very bitter towards it, because it broke my heart number of times. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I couldn't go to games because I didn't want to know what it was like to sit on the other side of the fence. And this thought of I should still be playing was lingering in my mind. And we set out to write 1 page a day in this journal, sharing every detail, every little story, no matter how embarrassing the story is, no matter how this story makes me look a certain type of way, sharing everything, being open, transparent, and vulnerable. And there were days where I would write and I couldn't even see my laptop in front of me because my eyes were filled with tears. But as I started writing more and more, I began to heal. And another thing started happening. I started meeting more and more athletes who were struggling with the same things I was struggling with. Identity crisis, depression, not knowing what to do with life after sports. And the stories that I heard were so heartbreaking, so heartbreaking. I became so discontented with it. I used to think, somebody's got to do something about this. And I told my mentor all of this, and he starts laughing at me. And I said, what's so funny? He goes, remember when I told you there's purpose in your pain? This is it. Riley, we don't go through what we go through for ourselves. We go through what we go through to help others who are going to go through the same thing. That's purpose. So that's when my journal turned into my book, and the book changed. And before that, he would text me every morning saying, did you write today? Did you write today? And the text messages changed to create what you wish existed. Because I don't know any books that are helping athletes transition out of sports. I don't know any books that are saying, hey, everything you're learning to be successful in your sport is everything you need to know to be successful in life. These principles apply to everything. So again, my book changed. And at the end of every chapter that I was writing, I added a different section. And this is really the second book. This is the book that I wish I would have been able to read when I was playing. And this section is called Knowledge Applied. And to me, knowledge applied is wisdom. And wisdom is the greatest thing we could ever receive, greater than gold and silver, greater than any currency. And in these knowledge applied sections are the life lessons or something that I learned during this chapter, pun intended, of my life and how it's applied to my life afterwards and how it applies to you, the reader. And a lot of it has to do with identity. We get so wrapped up in our sport. We get so wrapped up in we're only as good as our last at bat, which is complete trash and a lie. And we spend the rest of our lives thinking, nothing will be as good as when we were playing. And that's just not true. And we spend the rest of our lives wishing we could go back and relive it instead of focusing on how we can make this moment even better. And the reason why we are more than athletes is because if we were just athletes, if we were made to just be athletes, we would die after our sports career ended. But the fact that we're still living, the fact that we still have breath, that means that we have purpose. And that purpose is far greater than we believe it is. And that purpose is far greater than sports. And the funny thing is, I got done writing this book, and I knew why. I knew the purpose. I knew why I was doing this, but I didn't know what. I didn't know how. I didn't know what the message was going to be. I didn't know how I was going to teach this. And at the beginning of every book, every chapter of every book, there's usually drop caps, the big first letter on each chapter, which is usually 3 lines long, big and bold. But I had 20 chapters in my book, and the drop caps of each chapter spelled out, I am more than an athlete. And I thought, that's it? Wow, that is it. And I wrote a conclusion after that basically says you are more than an athlete. You are more than anything you have done, are doing, and ever will do. You are more than your circumstance. You are more than who you believe you are. And until you change what you believe, nothing will change, period. So that's where it started happening. And I start sharing this as in my speaking engagements. I start sharing this to the athletes that I'm mentoring, and I start sharing this through my book. And I've seen lives radically change. But the problem is a lot of coaches, and I hate to use the word old school coaches, they don't want to hear this because they think it's going to take away the focus of the athlete on the sport. But it's actually the opposite. When the athlete understands that they are more than an athlete, they are more than a football player, they're more than a baseball player, they're more than a basketball player, and they start to realize that their performance on the field doesn't determine their worth and their value, they actually start to play better because they experience freedom for the first time. And with freedom, they're able to maximize the gifts they've been given. without putting extra pressure on themselves. And it's been an incredible journey so far.
Man, well, first of all, if you're listening to this, if you're a sports parent, if you're a student athlete, if you're a youth coach or an older coach, please go over to iTunes and find us at Sports Mastery with Riley Tincher. This is a 5-star show. Please leave some ratings and reviews, but do this. This is helping us. I think this message is incredible. He's discussing the importance of having a coach, a mentor, somebody that can talk to you constructively, that can give you confidence when you're at such a tender age. It sounds like Coach Everson and Coach Jim Miller and a couple of different friends were there for him at key times. There's a lot of nuggets in here. This is one that I can say I'm going to have to listen to this a couple of times because I have so many learning lessons. I'm listening to you, but I'm taking notes at the same time because there is a lot of nuggets in here. Again, parents, you have to listen to this because you have to understand that, and we've talked about this before on prior episodes, that your young student athlete is like your most precious thing that you have. So you have to be careful around the people, about the people that you put them around and the messages. TV is one thing, but when you're around somebody and they're saying certain things every day, and that's why I always encourage parents, like when I was strength training, and I'm getting back to it, is to come to the strength training session. I want you to see and know how I'm talking to your young student athlete. So we're on the same page, because it is discipline, and I teach from a technical aspect, but I also encourage them same coaches, go to the practices. Don't just drop your kid off. You want to see how coaches are communicating with your kids. Because at certain times, we have to have strategies to deal with difficult coaches, but some coaches we shouldn't have kids around. And then that's when it occurs. Maybe you should be playing at a different school or on a different team and not feel guilty about that, especially when we consider like long-term athletic development. And then, like you said, just developing as people, because we're talking about life after sports, and you want your kids around coaches that are going to teach life lessons that are beyond the field, diamond, court, or track. And, listening to you, Riley. And again, parents, if you're listening to this, student athletes, you'll see that Riley is talking about having focus, knowing what you want to do, having a work ethic, applying visualization, understanding the difference between stress and pressure. If you're feeling depressed, being able to reach out to a coach or an athletic director or somebody that you trust, your parents first. I think I really appreciate how, what was it? Your mentor that called and he said, "How are you doing?" And he kept pressing you. That's a nugget for me. I'm borrowing that. I like that.
And here's the thing out of that is, yes, we can say things like, if you're struggling right now, have the courage to reach out for help. But that's us expecting them to have the courage to do that. So if you're a coach, if you're a parent, if you're a leader, if you're a mentor, reach out, even to the strong ones, even to the ones who portray that they have it all figured out. Reach out to them, just like my mentor reached out to me, and connect with them and actually listen to them, not listen to respond, listen to understand them, but reach out to those people. If you haven't seen someone in a while who used to be around a lot, reach out to them. Connection is the answer.
I know you've gotten to a point where, tell us about Coachability, your mentorship program. What's that about, Riley? And how did you come to start that?
So when I got done writing the book, I actually I actually put it off for like 2 years. And because I was terrified of it. I was terrified because I'm completely open and honest in the book. I'm very transparent and vulnerable in it. I share things that I've not shared with anyone before. And the response freaks me out. And then also the magnitude that I think it has, the impact that I think it has also freaks me out. So I put it off, and I was kind of at a crossroads in my career where I was, do I continue to follow this path of strength and conditioning, which I got really great at and was impacting a lot of lives in that realm? Or do I jump ship, take a leap of faith, and pursue this book and what I believe it's capable of? And I went on vacation to Los Angeles, California. And on my vacation, I met a woman, and I start sharing my story with her for some reason. And I start sharing my struggles of depression and suicide with her. And I talk about my baseball career. I talk about my childhood. And she starts crying in the middle of our conversation. And I said, "Ma'am, why are you crying?" She says, "You remind me of my son. He was a baseball player." I said, "Was?" "Yeah, he was a pitcher in the minor leagues. And unfortunately, when he hurt his shoulder, the team he played for released him. And that was the end of his career and the end of his life. A few weeks after getting released, he decided to end his own life. And he wrote a suicide note. And on this note, it said, 'All I know is baseball. All I am is a baseball player. I don't want to know anything else. I don't want to be anything else.'" At the end of our conversation, she turned to me and said, "Riley, my son needed to read your book. And my son needed to be around you to hear these truths, to hear these principles, to hear that he is more than a baseball player." And out of that conversation sprung this mentorship program, Coachability. So now I get the chance to meet with athletes one-on-one and share the things that I wish I would have known back when I was playing. Again, the common theme of my adult life has been create what you wish existed. And it's really powerful to be able to sit across the table from my athletes and say, "I have been there. I've gone through what you're going through right now. And this is what I did. This is what I wish I would have done. But the underlying message is I made it through it alive, and so can you." And that is powerful. And a lot of the things that I deal with, my title is mental conditioning coach, which means these athletes that come to me, they come to me with a problem they're having on the field or on the court. Either fear, anxiousness, lack of discipline, inconsistency, things of that nature. They come to me with this problem. And my job as a sports psychologist, as their coach, as their mentor, is to figure out where this problem was coming from. What is the root cause of this problem? Because if I can give them all the visualization, all the goal setting, all the declarations, all the affirmations I want. But these are just treating symptoms. And 9 times out of 10, what's going on the field, on the court, has nothing to do with what is on the court or field. So my job, again, is to figure out what that is. And in the process of this, figuring out, okay, you believe this to be true about you. You believe you're not good enough because you were told this at 6 years old by a coach that you had, and you've held on to this for your entire life. And it's my job to challenge that. Who told you this? Why do you believe this to be true? And then it's my job to transition them to what the truth actually is. And then help them condition themselves, hence mental conditioning, into believing the truth about who they are, which is a lot more than they believe it is. And the thing is, through the athletes that I've worked with, I've had the great fortune of working with a lot of amazing athletes, a lot of elite level athletes, many of whom you know about. And the amazing thing is we like to internalize our problems, right? We like to personalize them. We like to exaggerate them. And we like to think that we're the only ones going through it.
I've done it for sure.
Yeah. And the thing that's taught me the most about this mentorship program is that no amount of money, no amount of followers, no amount of fame, no amount of notoriety makes our problems go away. So when I go speak to young athletes, I tell them this. I say, I realize that you think you're the only one going through this, but I promise you're not. There are athletes who you hold on this pedestal that you think are perfect, and you think that because they make millions of dollars and have unlimited resources that there is no possible way that they could have problems. Not the problems that I have, but I guarantee that's wrong. I work with a former Heisman Trophy winner who struggles with self-worth. And it's because he feels like nothing he does is good enough for his father. That's hard to comprehend because we're talking about the best college football player in the country. And he struggles with self-worth. I work with an all-pro football player who just signed a huge contract, has an entourage of 5 to 10 people around him at all times, but he struggles with loneliness because he thinks that if they knew the real him, they wouldn't like him. So he never lets anyone in. And these are problems all of us deal with. And to even go into, this is a really extreme story, to even go into the thing of, we have to figure out the root cause of our problems. And coaches, if something is going on the field with your athlete, it's probably not what's going on the field. There is something else that's happening that's causing this. Maybe it's not, but more than likely it is. I have a second-round draft pick out of high school, pitcher, who came to me with performance anxiety. At 18 years old, he was given $1.5 million signing bonus. And this first season as a pro, he blew out his elbow, had Tommy John surgery, and never quite recovered. And it's been, I think, 6 years ever since. And he's trying to make his way back. He's still really young, and he's got major league stuff. I'm talking he's 6'4", 6'5", can touch 100 miles an hour, has a devastating breaking ball. He could be in the major leagues. But in the bullpens, he's lights out. But when he goes out onto the mound in games, he's a totally different pitcher. His velocity goes down. He's all over the place. He has no control. And he comes to me to help kind of figure out why is he doing this? Where is this coming from? And again, our responsibility as coaches is to figure out the root cause of the problem. So I ask him the same question I ask a lot of my athletes. Who are you trying to impress? And after several questions, we finally identified what it is. And it's his father. What he didn't tell me when we first met is he's been in and out of rehab for the last 6 years because of an opioid addiction. What he didn't tell me is the $1.5 million that he signed for is all gone. It was actually gone in a year because of this addiction that actually turned into heroin. And knowing what I know about opioid addictions, the vast majority of people who struggle with opioid addictions had some sort of neglectful relationship in their childhood. So I asked him about his father, and he tells me that they had a rule in their house that if one of them, 2 of his brothers play in the major leagues right now, but if one of them had a bad outing, according to their father, this dad wouldn't talk to them until they had a good start or a good outing. And I said, when did this start? And he said, as soon as I started playing baseball, at 6 years old. Could you imagine at 6 years old, your father not talking to you because you had a bad performance on the field? And this is what this kid had to live with. So he's internalized this and turned this into, I have to impress my dad every single time I'm out on the mound. And it's transformed into this extreme performance anxiety. So I asked him more. I said, why did it result in heroin? Why did your opioid addiction result in heroin? And he said, the first time I took heroin, it felt like my dad was hugging me. I start crying. I just wanted to hug him and tell him that you are loved. You are more than who your dad thinks you are. And that's kind of what we've been doing ever since. And the sad part about this, that's not even the worst part. The sad part about this is that rule that I talked about, where his dad wouldn't talk to him unless he has a good start. Well, his dad hasn't talked to him in 4 years because his last start was a bad start, which was 4 years ago. And they wonder why this kid
like
struggles
what you're
with
saying
performance
because,
anxiety.
We talk about getting to the root of the cause, and you found that. And hopefully this youngster, he bounces back. I'm quite sure he will, working with you and being a part of your Coachability program. Before we close out, Riley, I had one more question for you, man. And this is all related to what we've been discussing, and especially the picture that you're talking about. So you have the casual fan, and we also have fanatics that, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever sport, what would you say to the fan or the parent or casual observer that might say something like, well, he just signed for $5 million. He just signed for 1.5 million. How can he have problems? It's like you sign and your problems are supposed to be solved.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Deshaun. I had a mentor tell me this one time. We spend the majority of our lives wishing and hoping for more money, thinking that it's going to solve all of our problems. And when we get more money, it doesn't. This is just the medicine to the symptoms. It doesn't make the problems go away. And to understand the pressure that comes with money, the pressure of performing at a high level because of X amount of money, the pressure that comes with performing at a high level at such a young age. This is debilitating to everyone. And the question I would ask them is, imagine if you were given $18 million and were expected to be perfect every single start you had when you were 18 years old. Imagine doing your job, but then you have 50,000 people watching you. And the minute you make a mistake, they all say the same thing. You had one job to do. I can't believe we're paying you all this money. How are you going to feel when that happens? Put yourself in their shoes.
The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the parent to work through together. The Sports Mastery Workbook was created for the student athlete and the coach to work through together. It was created in a sense and in a way to bridge the gap in communication between these parties and build a successful relationship dynamic. To learn more, visit sportsmastery.com/workbook or check out the show notes page and click on the link.